The digital advertising industry is facing a major shift in how audiences will be targeted, activated, and measured with the loss of third-party cookies and device IDs. Buyers need to reconsider their buying strategies and find privacy-friendly alternatives to reach their audiences, while publishers must find ways to create digital advertising revenue that can fuel their premium content strategy. Our next speaker will talk about the shift of the identity landscape, today's alternatives to third-party cookies, and what we can do to prepare for a cookieless world. Let's welcome Julien Delhommeau, Staff System Architect at Xandr. Bonjour, Julien. Buenos días. How are you?
Buenos días, Elena, y gracias. Buenos días a todos. No hablo español, disculpe. Ahora continuaré en inglés.
That's perfect. That is perfect. Thank you so much for coming and being the one to open this day. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Julien.
I'm very glad to be here among you all today, especially to be talking about a topic that I really like. I've been working in the industry for over 10 years now, and I find this industry very interesting because always something new, always a new challenge. And I think like the past 2 years have been very rich in terms of challenge. So let's deep dive now into today's topic, the future of identity. So as Elena mentioned, I'm Julien Delhommeau. I'm a staff system architect working at Xandr. And today I'll be walking you all through the following agenda. So first thing we'll do is we just go quickly over the current state of our industry with regard to identity and what challenges we're facing, the challenges that I was mentioning earlier. We'll then take a look at what the future of identity may look like. So what alternatives are already out there to try and solve for those challenges. We'll be then talking about the concrete next steps that advertisers and publishers should start to go through to achieve relevance in a post third-party cookie world. And finally, because the sales team at Xandr would not let me go on stage without talking about it, I will be going through the Xandr approach to identity and explaining a bit more how we at Xandr are going through those new challenges and trying to solve them with the new alternatives. And we obviously will finish with a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to start asking them, and we try to answer as many as possible towards the end of this presentation. So first, to start with where we are today and the challenges that we're facing, I think the easiest and fastest way to describe the situation today is that the ad tech industry is really undergoing an identity crisis. So what does that mean exactly? Where is this identity crisis coming from? There are several factors. I'd say the main one, the first one, is that there is end users, consumers are more and more aware of what's happening. They don't necessarily understand the details of everything, but they understand that they are being somehow tracked on the internet, that when they go to a website, they see an ad from a different website that they visited a couple of days ago, and that knowledge from users have resulted in two things. The first thing is we've seen regulators, government in many countries, but really starting here in Europe, in Spain, France, and the other EMEA countries. Regulators have been trying to address those users' concerns, and they've come up with new regulation to try and protect more the user's privacy on the internet. For us in Europe, that is GDPR, obviously, which I imagine you're all aware of due to the impact it had on not just our industry, but I'd say like our life for the past few years. And outside of Europe, we've also seen like many countries come up with their own privacy regulations, and it just keep popping more and more. Like we know of Japan, China that are coming through with new regulation, California, Brazil, Canada, many regulations around the world are coming up, and again, coming with their set of challenges for our industry. The other important change that we've seen after like the increase in users' concerns around their privacy is that some actors, web browsers, which obviously are key in our industry since they operate the source of the user's navigation for everything display, like for a lot of our industry. And those web browsers have decided on their own that the regulation that government were coming up with were not sufficient to protect the user's privacy. And they've decided that they needed to do something on their own. So it started a couple of years ago with Apple and Safari, and then followed through by Firefox. And more recently, we know that Chrome, which is the main browser in the world, have decided also to kind of follow in footsteps from those other actors. So what Safari and Firefox started to do was to just basically disable third-party cookies entirely from the browsers. And third-party cookies being like the fundamental piece of identity as we know it today on our industry. It has several impacts, which I will go over in the next slide. That it has several impacts, and Chrome is going through this again, following through their footsteps, but with a slightly different approach here. And again, we'll cover this a bit more in detail after, but they want to not just disable third-party cookies, but they want to replace them with other solutions. And also just to mention here that third-party cookies are the first piece that is falling down, but they are likely not the last one, unfortunately. We know, for example, that Apple has already taken measures this year with mobile ad ID, which is having a large impact on our ability to identify users with today's solution on mobile app as well. And we know that Chrome is starting to also tend in a similar direction. Those two things, both the new regulation and the new browser measures against third-party cookies, are having impact on both the advertisers, the publishers, and the ad tech industry as a whole. This is impacting many of the use cases that we're used to in our industry. So let's deep dive a bit more into what exactly are the impacts. There are many use cases that we do today, kind of just we do them on a day-to-day basis. For example, retargeting. So the ability for an advertiser to remarket users on the open internet after they've been visiting their website and showed some interest in a specific product from the advertiser. Retargeting today is based on third-party cookies and the usage of third-party cookies to identify the user when he goes to the advertiser's website, and then when he goes to the other's open internet websites. So without third-party cookies, retargeting as we know it today will not work anymore. Another use case that seems very basic, that's something that people do as a default rule in most of their campaign, but that heavily rely on third-party cookies, is frequency capping. So ability to not show the same ad over and over to the same user. This today rely on the ability to identify the user, which we do through third-party cookies, and which allow us to know that the user has already seen the ad X many times and make sure that it does not see it anymore. And again, this is very important use case because without frequency capping, advertisers are at risk of overflowing the users with their ad again and again, and having for results that the user would be annoyed by the ad, and so annoyed by your brand versus the initial goal, which was trying to either do some branding, prospecting, or retargeting. So important use case that also is broken with the disablement of third-party cookies, deprecation of third-party cookies. Conversion attribution, so ability to measure the performance of a campaign, to know when a campaign resulted in the user actually converting, actually buying the advertiser's product, is also today relying on identifying the user when he sees the ad on a website, on the open internet, and then re-identifying the same user when he goes to the advertiser's website and actually converts. And this, again, relies on third-party cookies ID. CPA optimization. So if you cannot know when an impression, when an ad resulted in a conversion, you cannot optimize your campaign to deliver more on the, to optimize your CPA. to generate more conversions. And finally, like behavioral targeting. So ability to go and target users that are more likely to be receptive to your brand. For example, if you're Nike and you want to do advertising for sports shoes, you likely want to target users that are interested in sports. If this is running shoes, you want to target people that runs often. So you need to be able to target people by interest. And today, this is very much based on the ability from third parties or from first party to identify the user across website, across internet, and build some kind of profile on this user. So we know about his interest. And this today relies on third party cookies. So all of those use cases are, and that's only the main one, but those main use cases that I'm sure like all of you use in their day-to-day job, they have been jeopardized by the deprecation of third party cookies and by the new regulations that are preventing the processing of personal data. So now let's try to take a look at exactly where we are today in Spain specifically. So those numbers, we pull them from the Xandr platform directly, so both as an SSP, as a DSP, so they should be pretty much representative of the Spain market. So what we've seen is, ever since GDPR came in, and we're now most of the market using TCF, we have about 5% of the impression that come to our platform in Spain, which do not have a user consent. And as such, we cannot process users' personal data. So we don't have the user's identity anymore. That's a specific challenge that's really specific to regulations. The other challenge with the browsers, this one is today already 35% of the market. 35% of the impressions that we see coming to our platform do not have a user ID, and no longer can use third-party cookies to identify the user. So think of Safari browser traffic or Firefox traffic. Those browsers are already impacted by the deprecation of third-party cookies. Overall, that's 40% of the impressions that comes to our platform cannot be addressed with third-party cookies in Spain today. So it means that 40% of the audience that as an advertiser you're trying to reach, you can no longer do that with third-party cookies. 40% of your inventory that you monetize as a publisher, you likely don't monetize anymore. Or if you do, it's likely very poorly if you're still relying on third-party cookies only. And also just to give like an example of where we think things are going, and unfortunately, we don't expect the situation to improve. It's actually the opposite. In France, which is also subject to GDPR, but whereas the DPA in France, the CNIL, is very active. They've been publishing new recommendations beginning of the year to enforce greater control, greater enforcement of the GDPR. What we've seen is that since about April 1st, when those new recommendations came in, where we used to be at around 5%, we are now above 15%. So within about 6 months, more or less, we have like 10% more of users that do not consent. So 10% more, again, above 15%, or slightly above 15% of users on the internet that are no longer targetable with third-party cookies. And we think that this trend is going to follow in other markets, including Spain, as we expect that over time, the different countries, especially in EMEA, that are all subject to GDPR, will try to align toward a similar approach on how to enforce GDPR. And the 15% in France is unfortunately, again, it's not the end. The prediction forecast we have is that by next year, we expect to have something between 20 and 30% of users that will opt out of personalized advertising of the data being processed, personal data being processed by ad tech industry. So what that means is, again, today already it's 40% of your inventory that is no longer targetable, monetizable with third-party cookies, but we expect this to keep increasing over the next months, years. So I guess now it's very clear for everyone or what the issue is and what challenges we're facing. So that was a bad part. I know I'm going to try and cheer you up with the future of identity and all the innovative solutions that the industry has come up with, which may be a solution to face those challenges and to be able to reclaim those 40% of inventory that are no longer addressable with third-party cookies. So there are few alternatives out there, and I'm going to try and cover like the main ones. One first alternative that we've seen is the first-party publisher ID solution. So what is this exactly? So we often hear about the post-cookie world. This is actually a simplification of the challenge. What's going away is not cookies, it's only third-party cookies. So basically cookies that are shared across domain, which allow you to track the user across domains. First-party cookie, which are a cookie from the website the user is currently visiting, are not going away. Not in Chrome, not in Apple, Safari, not in Firefox, and they are not threatened at all right now, which means that as a publisher, you will still be able to track the user across your website. So from one page to another, you will be able to know that this is the same user, and you will be able to build a user profile from his visits on your website. If you're a newspaper and you know that a user is coming very often every week on article about economy, you know that this user is fairly interested in economy. So you can build a profile and add this information to his profile, and you can then, using your understanding, your knowledge of this user, sell this information to advertisers to again be able to re-enable some of the use cases that we're losing with the deprecation of third-party cookies, such as behavioral targeting. So how does that work is, as a publisher, you will have to generate a publisher ID. It's basically, it can be a first-party cookie, but you can also use other methods such as local storage, or I won't go into the technicalities here, but just say that you need to have an ID that's owned by you as a publisher, which you can then inject into directly the SSP partners that you work with, or directly, we've seen also some publishers directly from the page, retrieve the user's profile and not share the user ID directly, but just share the user profile into their SSP, and then translate this into something that is digestible by advertisers, such as a deal ID or a segment audience. This use case, this solution also allows advertisers to regain control of the frequency capping among a single website. So it's not the frequency capping where we know as of today, which is a cross-domain frequency capping, but across a single website, you can already, with this solution today, re-enable frequency capping among a single website, which is already a pretty good thing. Another solution, which is likely one that you will have heard a lot of, is industry ID solution. So they were different names. So you may have heard of them as the universal ID solution or the common ID solution, but all those names just really point to the same thing, which is solution that tries to bring a user identifier that is cross-domain. So similar to what third-party cookies add, like having an identifier for the user that is allow us to track the user across, identify the user across website, across his visit on the open internet, but obviously not using third-party cookies anymore. So most of those solutions are relying on the user providing some PII, so personal information, personal identifier, such as his email address, so that we can turn this email address, which obviously is common to other website he visits, turn this email address into a hashed salt pseudonymous ID. So very similar to the ID that we use today with third-party cookies, but this time based out of the email address. This is a good solution as it allows you, when you have a user that's connected to many different websites and you've been using the solution to re-identify the user, to have this unique user identifier, you can re-enable all of the use cases that you used to have, like retargeting, conversion tracking, frequency capping, cross domains. All of those works, and I'd say they even work better than with third-party cookies because the email being the same for the user, across this device. So on my mobile and on my browser, when I'm using the same email address with those solutions, I will be identified as the same user. So one of the challenges that we always had with third-party cookies, which was cross-device frequency capping or cross-device targeting, no longer exists with those solutions, which are by default, by nature, a user identifier, not a device identifier. And we have also some variation of those solutions that do not rely on the users providing his email address, which obviously the main downside of the solution is that not every user is going to provide his email on every website that he goes to. Today, the authenticated traffic is about 10% of the open internet. We expect this to increase thanks to the publishers and advertisers trying to increase their authenticated traffic because they understand that it will be part of the solution tomorrow. So we expect this to increase, but it's likely not going to go above 20% or maybe 25% at best. So it means that this solution will not be able to address 75% of the audience, 75% of the internet. Other solution, and one that is pretty well known, I guess, in the Spanish market is TCPF, which is being led by the Spanish IB. I will not go into details on this solution today. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the Spanish market that can talk much better than me about it. But this is a solution that also re-enables some cross-domain identification of the user without relying on third-party cookies. A third type of alternative, one that has been working very well for the past, let's say 2 years, but actually it's been working well for the past 20 years now, is contextual targeting. So contextual targeting is really how we used to do advertising before, right? So it's not targeting the ad based on the user's information, based on the user profile, but targeting the ad based on the context the user is currently viewing, which is not personal data, and which allow us to be able to target and address this audience without having to rely on third-party cookies. But also, and that's the big benefit of this solution, is without having to process personal data, meaning without being subject to the new regulation. So that's the today only solution that allows you to address 100% of the people on the internet, as you're no longer subject to consent, you're no longer subject to third-party cookies. And those solutions have been there for a while now. There has just been a lot of innovation around contextual in the past 2 years due to the third-party cookies being jeopardized. But we have seen like very innovative solution for contextual targeting. We've seen people creating panels of users that they know, which they have information about. They know if they're a man, if they're a woman. They know what age they are. They know what jobs they do. They know their interests. So they have all those information about this very sample panel of users. They follow those users across the internet, so they know which web page they visit. And from there, using machine learning algorithm, using data science, they're able to assign an audience to a web page. Basically, they will know that among their panel, users that are interested in sport go more often on those list of URLs, list of websites. So when later an advertiser wants to target audience that like sports, they will know which URL to target in priority to be able to reach the specific audience. So we've seen like a lot of innovation. It's no longer just being able to target based on the URL and the keywords in the URL. It goes much further than that. It's semantics analysis of the page, is reverse engineering of the audience that goes to the page. It's panel analysis. We've made like some very strong partnership within Xandr, for example, with Telefonica, with obviously the telco provider, has a lot of information about the users that use his networks and is able to use this information similar to the panel example that I was giving. He uses this information about the users that he works with to understand which URL, which website are more likely to represent which audience. And the results are pretty good in terms of addressing the right audience. The one thing that Contextual is not very good at is conversion tracking or frequency capping, because obviously frequency capping today is based on the user identification. However, what you can do is you can mix Contextual with data science driven solutions, which again, using information from consented users, from user identified, we're able to build data science models that will predict where to deliver and how to deliver to ensure a certain level of frequency capping. So what that means is really that the industry has evolved that much over the past 2 years that today we have solutions that allow you to apply frequency capping without having the user's identity. So you're going to be able to apply a frequency capping of 3, which will not be, unlike today, will not be an exact frequency capping of 3 times, but it will be an average of 3 views per user for your ad. And this mix with Contextual can give you already like pretty strong results. And data science can also be used for measurement, for targeting. It has, again, like several use cases. It's very nascent. It's still early beginning, but there is like pretty good things going on with data science driven models. Finally, the last solution that I will be talking about today is the solution that the browser come up with, the browser frameworks. So Chrome, for example, like I said earlier in the presentation, has decided not to just remove third-party cookies, but to replace them with a set of APIs, which is a privacy sandbox. It's a bit complex, and I will not go into details today, but basically there will be several solutions that will be offered to try and address the different use cases such as targeting, measurement, frequency capping, using new solutions within the browser that do not rely on third-party cookies. So we've seen like all the solutions. What we've done at Xandr is we've run a couple of surveys over the past few years to try and assess like the vision of our clients, of advertisers, of publishers, and how do they think about the different alternatives out there. The result of those surveys were pretty interesting, and I think pretty in line with the way we were approaching things. Is we can see in those surveys that three advertisers out of 4 are going to use contextual, or are already using contextual targeting as a way to readdress audience that is no longer addressable with third-party cookies. They're going, so 60% are going to use first-party data, and 45% are going to rely on publishers' first-party identifiers. 40% and most are going to use user industry identifier, and 20% are considering using browser-provided frameworks. So it's all of the solution together. And it also makes sense when you put this in the mix with the other surveys that we did on the right side, which show that people are going to use not just one solution, but a set of solutions as long as they're interoperable, that you can use them together. Which brings us to the next point is, because the industry is kind of complexifying, because we're moving from a single third-party cookie solution that has been there for like 20 years now to a set of new innovative solutions, which again, advertisers and publishers are going to get familiar with, which is going to take some time. There is going to be a learning curve. You're likely going to need a way to simplify this to start with. And curated marketplace, which again is also something new in the industry for the past couple of years, is a place to start to try and harmonize the different solutions together. Curated marketplace, to just summarize in one sentence, is a way for you as an advertiser or as a publisher to add some additional layer of intelligence on your top of your DSP, on top of your SSP, to be able to merge together solutions that allows contextual, that allows first-party publisher ID, universal ID solution, and turn them into something that is much more digestible for the trading team you work with, such as the deal. Perfect. So now achieving, what do you need to do? What are the concrete next steps that you need to take to work in the world today and tomorrow? First is you need to start testing new solution. Again, The challenge is not tomorrow. It's not in 2 years when Chrome is going to remove third-party cookies. It's today already. 40% of your audience is no longer reachable with third-party cookies. So start testing. The two important things are point 2 and 3 here, which come together, is you need to leverage, you need to start building more concrete relationship with premium publishers, and you need to prepare to leverage your own first-party data. And finally, you need to support the open internet. Do not think that walled garden will solve this for you, because walled garden can only address part of your audience. They can only do so much for you. The open internet will allow you to target audience in context that you will no longer be able to address within walled garden in a way that you cannot do it within walled garden. So you need to start looking into the solution that allow you to take advantage of the open internet. As a publisher, what you want to do is, again, like similar to the advertiser, you want to start building your first-party data, and you want to start building strong relationship with the buy side. So there is better communication and better collaboration between the two. You also want to start collaborating with partners that can bring you like those innovative solutions. And finally, if there is one thing we should have learned by now, is we need to communicate more with our users. We need to be transparent. And I think that's not just actually a publisher role, that's an industry role, is we need to educate end users. We need to educate consumers on exactly what is the trade-off between the advertising and the open internet they access in their day-to-day. And finally, and I'm going to be very quick here, but just to go over the Xandr approach to identity, is we've seen it already, but there are many solutions out there. And what we want to do at Xandr is really, we want to provide a solution that allows you to leverage all of the solutions, because we think that there will not be one solution to replace third-party cookies, but we think that it will be the combination of all those solutions together that will solve for tomorrow's identity. What that means is we're going to have a platform that empowers advertisers and publishers to leverage the first-party data, to use universal ID solution. We're going to be compatible and working with browsers frameworks to enable to the most of your audience. And we're going to obviously use data-driven solution to re-enable frequency capping, to use contextual targeting, all of this together. So just to wrap up here, there has been a lot of content. So there is the three things that I'd like you to remember from today is, one, act now. 40% of your audience today is no longer monetizable, no longer addressable with third-party cookies. So you need to start doing things now, not tomorrow, not in 2 years. What does that mean? It means you need to start testing with all the alternatives that we've been talking about today: contextual, first-party, universal ID, and to some extent browser frameworks. And finally, you need to prepare for tomorrow. Do not expect people to solve things for you. You need to educate yourself. You need to understand how things are going to work and how things are going to be beneficial for you. And to do that, you can rely on the IAB and other associations that do a lot of educational work on those topics, and also on your trusted partners, such as Xandr. And that's it. So we now have a few minutes to address any questions that you may have. So hopefully you have many, and I can try to answer.
Well done. Thank you so much, Julien. Wow, what a way to start in this data session today, in the third day, this Inspirational 21 third day. My God, that was so interesting, but so much and so intense. But as you say, it's very clear. Act now, start testing, and prepare for tomorrow. That was perfectly clear for everybody, in case they were saying, where do I start? Well, now. That wrap up. Thank you so much. We don't have much time for questions, a couple of minutes, but there's one question from Nicolas. It's asking you, what is your opinion on new browsers like Generate that specifically block all trackers? Is this a fad or the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough question. I'd say, is this the future that I want or the industry wants? I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, if you think of it like from one side, the regulators, and on the other side, the browsers, they have two very different approach. A regulator have never been against third-party cookies. They've never been against processing users' personal data. but they wanted to enforce some limitations, some constraint, and more importantly, they wanted transparency and control from the end user. On the other end, if you think about how browsers are approaching things, they're not talking about transparency, they're not talking about control from the user, they're just talking about, let's remove cross-device, and let's remove tracking entirely of the user. In my opinion, that's not the right approach, but again, that's things that we'll have to deal with. So what about those new browsers? I think the new browsers today are marginal. Like the main browsers will remain Safari, Firefox, and Chrome. And for those, we know pretty much how they're dealing with things and how we will have to deal with their solutions. And so I do think that those solutions are part of tomorrow's future.
Excellent. Just the last question, Julien, because we have 1 minute. Does Xandr have its own ID solution that it's bringing to market, and what is it based on?
So we don't have our own ID solution. We thought that there was enough ID solution as there is today. So what we decided to do is rather, instead of coming with a new additional identity solution that will just add more fraction, we wanted to be able to build a solution that is, I'd say, agnostic of those identity solutions and can work with as many identity solutions as possible.
Okay, well, Julien Delhommeau, we have no more time, but thank you so much for setting the bar so high this morning. The only way it's up from here. Oh my God, it was fantastic having you as a start, the first speaker in this data hall, or this data vertical, Inspirational 21. Thank you so much for the Xandr support. And I invite you to stay with us the whole day, because we're going to talk about these issues more in depth. As you mentioned, third-party cookies, of course, the TCPF by IIB, etc. Thank you for this overview of the situation and the challenges. As you say, is now and the future is bright.
Thank exactly. You. Thank you very much. And I was very honored to be the first presenter. Thank you.